So guys, what we're going to talk about today is, there's a lot going on with NAR and the changes. And a majority of us started our business as buyer agents, and a majority of us are still buyer agents. So what I really, really want to focus on today is how are you going to procure more buyers? How are you going to set yourself and your team up for success now and in the coming future as the rules change? And these are things that you truly should have already implemented. And if you haven't, I recommend that you do. It's been very successful for myself and my business and my team. And so we're going to dive in. You all know that, it's my style for you to jump in at any time. I'm not here to hear myself speak for an hour. I'm here so we can all grow together. So I'm just going to dive in, and I've created when I say I, I mean Michael, my marketing guy, and I together have created a home buyer guide that I'm happy to go over and share with you all. But let's just dive in and just start with this. So I always say that I start with buyer because I think a majority of us started as buyer agents. And I think we do this because we're all new, right? We don't know the business very well. We lack the self-confidence. And so we start as buyer's agents to get our feet wet. And so for a majority of us, I started over a decade ago. I would show properties, a multitude of properties, before I was asking for a buyer agency to be in place. So I'm going to backtrack for a little bit because a majority of you do not practice in North Carolina. In North Carolina, we're a little ahead of the curve when it comes to NAR rules. We have to have a buyer agency in place before we submit an offer. So I know for some of you, tell me, who has to have that right now? Who has to have a buyer agency in place? Wow, so many of you don't. Holy smokes. So for us, we have to have a buyer agency in place before we actually submit an offer. But as you all know, we're going to have an agreement in place before we even show a property. So what we're going to really work on today is the confidence to sit down with a strat session with these buyers so you will bring your value proposition to the table and really be able to close them. So what does it mean for us on August 17th? What it really means is that it's going to push us to require a commitment from these buyers before we actually show them a property. So some of us are very, very good at this. And the ones who are good at this are the ones who really value their time. I value my time so much. So I don't waste a lot of time showing buyers. Now, I know some of you may be saying, well, Chanel, I don't even know these people. I don't know that I want to commit to them. I don't know that they want to commit to me. Where do we fall along this process? But I'm going to tell you that the more that you show them that there's a process in place on the front end, the more they're going to trust you implicitly from the beginning. So I don't work Flex Zillow leads. I don't work leads that are bought. So it may be a little different for you all who have that as your lead gen coming in. But the best thing that you can do is go ahead and set up that process to ensure that you're getting in front of the buyers in a very positive way. So in North Carolina, like I said, we have to have a buyer agency in place already. So what I do is when I get that first phone call, I ask them, how did they receive my information? How did they reach out to me? Sometimes it's from a listing that I have. Sometimes it's a referral. Sometimes they just go on Google and they see my reviews on Google or on Zillow or in other ways, and they give me a call. The first thing that I ask is, I want to secure a strategic session with them. And I say, I'd love to secure a strat session with you. And they always say, well, what is that? And I said, well, this is my opportunity to share with you exactly how I'm going to work for you and ensure that we find the property that you're looking for. And so I don't like to call it a buyer consult, and a lot of people do. And a buyer consult to me is a buyer's agent who sits down and says, okay, now tell me what you'd like. What type of floor plan, how many bedrooms, how many baths, what's your price point? I'm not discounting that, guys, but that's not the purpose of a strat session. The purpose of a strat session is to really work around the two fears that every single buyer has. The two fears that every buyer has is fear of missing out and paying too much for a property. So those two things, if you can actually, I don't know why I just had balloons go in front of my face, but that was super cool. Those two things are amazing. So again, a lot of my success has come from really discerning who I'm going to get in front of. So I feel like we're constantly taking all the poop that's in front of us. So whether they're cold calls, knocking on doors, all these massive leads that come in, and we're trying to turn this poop into gold, that all this gold that we already have in front of us just turns to poop, right? So I want you all to be super, super mindful about whom you're choosing to spend your time with, and it starts with the strat session. So the strat session is your opportunity to show off. And I don't want you to talk about how many sales you've had. I don't want you to, think about it depends on how you look. I mean, this is really about you being the economist and you being the true person who can speak about what's going on in the market. You are the expert. When I say showing off, I want you to be able to either by Zoom or in person, sit down and share with them exactly what the conditions of the market are. What is the price per square foot? What type of concessions are you seeing in the market? What are the interest rates that you're seeing in the market? You all should be able, off the top of your head, be able to tell all of this information to these people, because that is already out of the gate going to be able to really show the difference between you and so many other buyer's agents who walk in. Because, I mean, firstly, how many do you know who actually have a strat session document that they share with buyers? One. That's right. So before we end in June, and Jordan, before we end in June, I want you all to actually create a strategy document for these buyers. That's extremely important. And we'll walk through how to do that. But when you're talking to them on the phone, I want you all to say to them, great, I really appreciate you reaching out to me. What are one of the two ways that we can sit down? Would you like to meet in Zoom or would you like to meet in person? So it's kind of like I always say, I let my boys choose their clothes, but I put the outfits out that I want them to choose from. So no matter what, I'm very pleased with the outcome. So you're giving them the opportunity to be in control, but no matter what, you're getting the appointment, right? So no matter what, that's what I want you to do. So I want you to set it up, and they'll say, well, what is the purpose of meeting that? And you'll say, because I know one of the two things that you are most fearful about is either fear of missing out or fear of paying too much. So that's why it's important for me to sit down with you and really discuss with you how I show my value. So there are three things that I do on a regular basis that a lot of buyers agents don't do. The first is that I audit financing of buyers to ensure that they are getting the best lender in place to help them with the loan that they need to get the property that they need. Off-market properties is number two. So everybody can go into the MLS and, please, I want you to retrain yourselves to not say to somebody, I'm going to set you up on the MLS. And by doing so, you're going to get all the properties that are available. Do you know how many other agents are doing that? Every single agent in the market. So yes, you're going to set them up to get an MLS search, but you're also going to tell them that by working with me, you're going to get off-market properties that are only available to buyers who work with me. Now, I don't know about those who are not with EXP, but if you're with EXP, we have a beautiful off-market property system that's set. So for those of you who are not with EXP, just reach out to your BIC, reach out to the person in charge and just see what type of off-market properties that you have available. For those of you who are really farming neighborhoods, I guarantee you already have off-market properties. You have sellers who whisper in your ear, well, you know what, Chanel, I don't really want to list right now, but if you have somebody who's interested, I'm willing to show the property. These are off-market properties, and that puts you ahead of everybody else in that buyer situation. Another thing is strategy. I think that we do this as buyer agents so often that we think that everybody else functions the way that we do. And I want you to get very clear and concise about what your strategy is to ensure that your buyers do not miss out on properties and are not paying too much. One that I utilize on a regular basis is an escalation clause. So you cannot utilize an escalation clause on every single listing, but you can on a majority of them. And it has saved my buyers tens of thousands of dollars. But a majority of agents don't even know what an escalation clause is, nor do they know how it works or what it does. So these are the three things that I really want you to start focusing on that's a part of your strat session. Any questions up to this point? So what we have to get really, really good at now is to understand what our value is, guys. You have to fully understand what your value is as a buyer's agent, and you have to be willing to ask your buyer to pay for it. If you're not comfortable with having these conversations, that means you're not clear about what your value is. So show of hands, who's very, very clear about their value proposition and what they bring to the table? I love it. But there are some who aren't. I will tell you, I'm constantly all the time trying to figure out what my value is. And I was not at all comfortable asking the buyer to make up the difference if a seller wasn't willing to pay what I feel I'm worth per transaction. But once I became very clear and concise about what my value proposition was, I have no problem at all asking that buyer to go ahead and make up that difference. And it starts with that strat session. Did you have a question, Travis, or were you just raising your hand?
Nope, I was just saying I have mine nailed down thanks to Mr. Austin Chevron.
I love it. So the point of this strat session is really to set expectations. So for those of you who say, oh my gosh, this buyer is calling me at 10 o'clock at night, at 5 o'clock in the morning, every single day of the week, that's your fault. That's because you have not set up clear and concise communication strategy and funnel to ensure that you've created those boundaries. People who work with me are very clear, and they know that I work from 8 a.m. in the morning till 5 p.m. at night, Monday through Friday. If you need to reach me on the weekend, you can if it's an emergency, but otherwise that's how I work, and those are the people that I attract. But to sit down and really talk about what the preferences are with your buyer, and what you really want to do to ensure that they're communicated properly. And it depends on the age, right? So my buyers who are in their 20s, they will only text me. They will never pick up the phone, and they will never look at their email. Those who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, they will only pick up the phone. They will never check their text, and they will hardly check their email, right? But you have to be very, very clear about how they want to communicate. But let's go back to the strat session. So whether it's by Zoom, or if it's in person, I want you to start off with what those three things are. This is what differentiates me from every single buyer's agent in the market. And I want you to say that because they're going to start asking what you're bringing to the table when they know they have to pay for your services. So the first thing, like I said, is to be very clear and concise about the strategies you're using to ensure that they're seeing all the properties necessary, they're not missing out, and they're not paying too much for their properties. The second one is to ensure that they're getting those off-market property deals. And the third is to ensure that that lender is in place. I cannot stress that enough. And then I always go into on my strat session doc, I always say it is very important to work with a local lender in my community. And then I tell them why. I say in North Carolina, we have a due diligence period of time. This period of time is negotiated, and you have a large amount of money on the front end that you don't get back. So because of that, the lender has to fully understand and be very clear and concise about when that due diligence period is to get the appraisal done and everything else that needs to happen. So in order to do that, we need to really work with somebody local. We also need to ensure that you're getting the best rate possible. I'd like to audit your finances to ensure that that amount that you're paying or that your lender has actually given you is not too high. And every single time I save my clients anywhere from $4,000 to $8,000 just by bringing other lenders to the table so that they can ensure that they are competing with each other. So if they're like, my friend is a lender and they're going to give me a great deal, I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad that you're super confident in that lender, but I just need to ensure that it's true. So let's go and bring in another lender so you can compare rates. You know how many times they end up changing their lenders? They think their friend gave them the best deal ever. And it's not the best deal ever. And then after I talk about how important it is to have a local lender, I ask them who their lender is. If they say Bank of America, I say, nope. There's no way we're going to be using Bank of America. Bank of America, you're a cog in the wheel. I'm going to have to talk to 25 people to get anything done. They could care less that there's a due diligence period of time in North Carolina. Your money's on the line. And if that falls through for whatever reason, they'll just move on to the next person. If it falls through on my end with my local lender, I have to see Kate at church. I have to see Tom at the baseball field. They do not want to see an upset, angry, disappointed Chanel. So they're going to make sure that you're taken care of no matter what. They're going to give you the most competitive rate possible. So I need you to really work out on that front end who that lender is. When you're setting up that appointment, guys, I really always want you to walk through what those next steps are for the buyer. It just makes them feel more in control, right? So when you get that phone call in and you're asking them if they wanted to do it by Zoom, if they want to do it in person, I want you to just confirm every single thing, right? And then when you have that meeting in person, the one thing that I think a lot of us don't do that we need to get better at is to read the body language of the person. Now, how many of you have had a couple and you ask the couple what their price point is and one says one number and the other one says another number? These are things, right? These are things that if you don't do that during this strat session on the front end, it becomes extremely uncomfortable when you're showing properties. I used to not have strat sessions, and then I would have the wife pull me aside and say, you know what? I actually am willing to spend $200,000 more. Just don't tell Tom. And then I'd have Tom pull me aside and say, you know what? I actually need to spend about $100,000 less, but don't tell Sarah. Like, we need to have open conversation and communication that needs to happen on the front end. So you've heard Austin and Nate talk a lot about the DISC profile. The more that you learn the DISC profile, the more that you're going to be able to read that person who's across the table from you, and you're going to be able to mirror what's going on with them. So when I sit down with this strat session, I ask a lot of questions, but then I stop and I just listen. Tell me, why are you moving to North Carolina? Or why are you choosing to upsize or downsize in this area? And I just let them talk. I always say that we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and you just need to listen to them. And more so, that allows you to start really seeing their body language and seeing how they're responding. A lot of times I will tell you it's one partner who really wants to move and the other one who doesn't. And you need to be really clear about that. And you need to see what that looks like and what those dynamics are. Because you don't need to worry so much about the person who's very open and clear and communicative. It's the one who's sitting back in the corner with their arms crossed and sitting back and doesn't want to talk to you at all. Because that's going to be an issue for you when you're out showing the properties. Right, Nina? And so it's really important with, especially to firstly, when you're having that consult, to have everybody who's going to be there to be on the call or in person, because they all are going to be making that decision together and you need them to be there. There's some skills that you're going to need to brush up on too when we're going through this process of having NAR and having to ask for buyers to possibly start paying for these things. The first is communication. You have to be very clear and concise with your communication from beginning to end. That's extremely important all the way through. And you're going to walk through that on your strat session. And for those of you who haven't really had to negotiate in real estate up to this point, it's time to either start reading books on negotiation, start taking classes on negotiation, or sit down with other team members and really learn how to negotiate a deal. Because this is where things are going to happen. For those sellers, I'm starting to see it in North Carolina. We're starting to see 0% for buyer agency. And in the agent remarks, it says, please submit a confirmation of compensation as to what you feel you should be compensated for this transaction. And so with that, the seller can agree or disagree. But if I have that buyer agency in place that clearly shows what I'm going to be compensated by my buyer or not, then I'm not as worried about that. But it's your job to be able to communicate that and negotiate that on the front end.
Chanel, do you mind if I jump in for a second?
Would you please, Nina?
So if this is what, I haven't seen this yet in our market, and Chanel and I are in the same market. So this is one of the reasons that all of us have to have our resumes ready to go that actually proves our worth as agents as well to the sellers. So we should always have something ready to go so that buyers understand, in addition to having, I think, the strat session, this is why I'm so valuable. But if now the sellers are going to ask, like, why are you worth 2.4% or 2.5 or 3%, whatever it is in your market, you better be ready to tell them, like, this, you want to see why? Let me show you why, and be ready for that. Because I do think that we might be moving more toward, hey, you're brand new in the market, you don't close anything or whatever the case may be. We might be seeing a sliding scale of what people are willing to pay.
Well, Nina and I are in the same market, but we're in different counties. So in my counties, I'm already seeing anywhere from 1.5% to 2% for buyer's agents. And so you've got to start practicing having these conversations with your prospective buyers and your current buyers and deciding what you all want to be paid per transaction. So, I mean, that's the very first thing is, what am I worth? What's my value? How much time is this going to take me? And then really looking at your process from beginning to end and how much time are you spending in a transaction? I think this is so important, guys. If you don't have a transaction coordinator, if you don't have somebody who's inputting your on the listing side, inputting your listings, if you don't have somebody on the buyer side who's really communicating, you've got to figure out how much time you're spending in these transactions. Because when you're saying yes to one transaction, you're saying no to another one, and it's costing you money. So just as a reminder, in your buyer agency agreement, that percentage that you put in that agreement, you can be paid up to that amount. So let's just say that a seller is offering 4%, and in your buyer agency agreement, it says 2.4%. You are only going to be paid 2.4% for that transaction. So you have to be very, very clear about that. about what that is. And more so, I am really tired of hearing people saying, you need to know what your value is. You need to know, what questions to ask. You need to know more than that. You need to be extremely clear about what differentiates you from other buyer agents in your market. What are they? And that was a very hard question for me to answer for a long time. And that's when I really started realizing that off-market deals, number one, because of lack of inventory, are going to bring more buyers in for you than anything else. Number one, first and foremost. There's no question in my mind. Again, if you do not work with a firm who has off-market deals, you darn well better start making phone calls to expired listings. You start calling those properties that you're seeing that have been rented. Anything that you can see to start building up potential listings that are off market, but a seller would actually consider. So just make the calls. Hi, so-and-so, I see that you rented your property a couple of years ago. Are there current tenants in the property? Yes, great. How long, when does that lease end? Okay, great. Would you consider selling if I brought you a market value deal? You know what, I would. Guess what that is? That's a possible off-market property for you, right? So these are things that you have to start building in your cachet immediately, because that's what's going to differentiate you from everybody else. The other is really understanding who your vendors are in your area, right? So they're going to be buyers who come to you who have to sell their property before they can purchase. A contingency offer, how well is that going over right now in this market? Right? So you need to fully understand the vendors who are in your market who are able to offer cash to your clients if they don't want to list their property, and so that they can actually have that money to go ahead and move forward, because there are some deals like that. The other is a finance contingency. So cash is not always king, in my opinion. You guys know I'm super heavy on the listing side, but for a lot of agents it is. So how do you make your buyer who needs a loan look like a cash buyer? And there are lenders, there are programs available that can actually have your buyer make them look like a cash buyer. And that's going to make all the difference in the world. So right now in our market, we're between 30 to 45 days. You need to find those lenders who can do it between 14 to 21. If you do not have those lenders already, you need to find them. There are lenders who are calling me every single day. You need to go out and you need to find those lenders. Now, not every single seller wants to actually be out of the property in 21 days, but they damn well want to close in 21 days. So this is what I'm telling you, is you find those lenders who are able to go through the entire contingency process based on the state you're in, 14 to 21 days, and offer a seller concession of up to 30 days after. That's going to make all the difference in the world. All the difference in the world. These are the things that make the difference. What I don't want you to do when you're creating your strat session or your buyer home consult, right, is I don't want it to be just a questionnaire. Guys, this is important to understand, what your buyers are looking for. But exactly what Nina said, this is your resume. I want you to start treating your buyers like you're treating your sellers. You show up ready to kill it. And you set that bar so high for your buyers that if they speak to anybody else, it's going to be embarrassing for those other agents, because they're not going to touch where you are right now. So off-market deals, truly figuring out how they're not going to miss out on properties and how they're not going to overpay. So for me, I really had to strategize and work with my attorney. So you all have at least one fabulous real estate attorney that you can depend on no matter what, that you give them a lot of business. I want you to sit down with them and start really working with these addendums that fall within your real estate commission that will make the difference when you're submitting these offers. So again, for me, it's being able to offer that amount of money without giving it all away. So I had to, in the state of North Carolina, we are not able to share what other offers are. So we can say, with the seller's permission, we can say if we have multiple offers, but we're not able to say we have an offer for 500, one for 525, one for 550. We're not able to say that. I know in California you are. Are you able to in Indiana, Michigan, anywhere else? No, right? California is crazy. Oh, Lisa, you're able to in South Carolina? Get out.
Sorry, in Michigan.
In Michigan, you
not
are.
in South Carolina. Not in South Carolina.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think that's a game changer. I think it's phenomenal. I think you're really able to be very open about that. But in North Carolina, we're not. So if I'm able to actually create a document where I'll walk you through it. So essentially let's just say that the property is $1 million and my buyers are willing to go up to $1,100,000, but I put in the offer at $1,050,000 and they'll be the highest offer by $5,000 or $10,000. That saves my buyers, like I said, tens of thousands of dollars every single time. Now, the way that I get around that, because a lot of my buyers say, well, how do I know that the other agent isn't just lying? Well, we have a third party, in this case, a settlement attorney, look at the other offer to confirm that it's there. And that's how we're able to get it done. I'm telling you, that has worked so many times, I can't even tell you. Another strategy that works for me a lot of times is I'll submit an offer, let's just say hypothetically for full price. I just did this. It was an offer for $1 million. And I said, instead of putting an expiration on the offer, I said, if your clients verbally accept the offer in the next 3 hours, I have an additional offer, $20,000 over, already signed, that I'll send over to you immediately. So that has worked every single time as well. Procuring that property that otherwise we wouldn't be able to procure. So you all have got to strategize and think out of the box of ways to put your buyers above everybody else. Let's see. What did Tucker say? Tucker, do you mind just putting it on and verbally telling us?
Yeah. So our escalation clause has language in there that requires the seller or the listing agent to send over the other offer that we're beating out, which is the sensitive.
They just redact it?
Yeah.
I love that. That works. I mean, so tell me, how often have escalation clauses worked for you?
All the time. I use them
all the times. Does it shock you how few buyer's agents use it?
Yeah, kinda. It is kind of crazy. We are allowed to share, what the highest offer is, and some listing agents will, some won't. So I'd say it's about 50-50 as far as whether I have that information or not. And if I don't, and there are multiple offers, I'm definitely using the escalation clause. And yeah, it works so well.
I agree.
But I do find I have to coach, especially first-time buyers, because they think about it in such small numbers. Like, well, let's do like $2,500. Let's escalate like $2,500 over. And like, man, you got to be thinking in $10,000 blocks or more, to really make a difference.
I agree with you. I will tell you that I lost an offer during COVID. You always remember the ones that you didn't get, right? I lost an offer in COVID, and it's because we had an escalation clause in place. This was $200,000 over list price, but my buyers were only willing to go $2,000 over the highest offer that was on the table. And when the listing agent gave me feedback, she said, I've got to be honest with you. The sellers were offended that your clients were only willing to go $2,000 over the highest offer. Now, I mean, my gut reaction was, you've got to be kidding me. We were already $200 over the list price, but that made the difference between our offer being accepted and not being accepted. So I completely agree with you. Miss Nina.
So I'll offer something that I don't know how it would work in other markets, but one of the things that we've learned through our family, our EXP family, is our sellers have to pay something called excise tax. Depending on the price point of the house, it may not be that much. And our seller's attorney doc prep fee also isn't that much in North Carolina, maybe like $400, $450, that kind of thing. So the same thing, like what Chanel is saying, like, hey, if you accept our offer, we will pay the excise tax for the seller. So it basically, once upon a time, sellers were paying buyers closing costs when it was a flipped market, but now we're offering to pay some of their closing costs, and it's one mean multiple deals as well.
Yep. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because you're right. These are the little things that make a difference. So the first thing that I want you all to remember is, if you're a little lost as to where to start to find your value, I want you to go into your MLS or wherever you're garnering your data right now and see what the numbers are and see who's winning those deals and how they're winning them, right? I want you to look at those list prices and purchase prices. I want you to look at those days on market. I want you to really look at that data overall and really, really study it and educate yourself. So for those of you who don't have a large number of sales, that's the best way that you can differentiate yourself from other buyers agents in the market, is just by educating yourself on everything. So there was a long time that I didn't have a huge amount of sales, but I knew our contract better than any other agent in my market. That was a fact, because that's the only thing that I could actually control. So by educating and understanding and walking through all of that with a buyer, they felt more comfortable and confident with me understanding contractually what was going on than they did with the millions of dollars of sales that are on the side that just kind of look like bragging rights. So what you're doing when you're meeting with those prospective buyers is that you're building trust and you're building confidence. If they know for a fact that you're doing something that others aren't willing to do or aren't doing overall, that is what's going to differentiate yourself from everybody else. The sales are going to come, guys, but that is not what's going to get you connected with these buyers. If they feel like you're really listening to them and their needs and what they want, I just need you to be the problem solver. That is all you are. You are the problem solver for them. And that's how I need you to really start positioning yourself in this market, is as the problem solver, because that is so important. So as you're setting up these strat sessions, the best thing to do when you're setting up these appointments is I don't want you all to wait an extended period of time to set them up. So if a phone call comes in on a Tuesday, I don't want you to wait until next Tuesday to have this virtual or in-person meeting. If you wait longer than 2 or 3 days, it exponentially diminishes your opportunity to meet with them. Has that ever happened to you all? Where you think that you wait, you book it out a week or two in advance, and then something changes, or they meet another buyer's agent? Like, I want you to do it within 2 to 3 days every single time. I want you to send out a calendar invite. It is a proven fact. If you send a calendar invite out to your prospective buyers for these sessions, there's a 12 to 15% chance higher that you're actually going to keep that appointment every single time. For me, if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. So I need you to go ahead and send out that calendar invite, have them accept it, because when somebody does that, they're making a commitment to you to show up. And that's very, very important. The other thing I want you to do is, usually I'll do it 24 hours before. I'll just send them a text, or I'll send them a video message. Hey, it's Chanel. I'm so excited to meet with you by Zoom or in person tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Looking forward to it. Another thing I'll do is, if I know for a fact that they're looking in a particular neighborhood or zip code, I will say, I've gone ahead and send you comps of what's been going on over the last year in this area, so we can have a real direct financial conversation when we sit down and talk about things. So you're already showing your value before you even show up. That's really important as well. Again, guys, it can't just be about floor plans, the number of bedroom and baths, and the price point anymore. You got to show them strategically how you're going to help them win, and how you're going to help them overcome those 2 fears that they have. That's very, very important. Once you go through, I'll show you guys my buyer guide. Once you go through that, you've got to close the deal. And this is what you've got to get very, very good at, is I want you to present the buyer agency agreement to them. And I want you to say this: I am here and I'm committed to you. I hope that you understand how I've differentiated myself from everybody else in my market. And as such, as I'm committing to you, I'm asking that you be committed to me. And that's it. And then just be quiet for a minute and just see how they respond to that. If they sit back, if they're closing their arms, if they're looking around, if they're looking down, you know they're not quite there yet. If they're moving forward, if they're leaning in, if they have a smile on their face, you know that they're ready to sign. So depending on one way or the other, I want you to proceed. If they're ready to sign, you just go over the buyer agency agreement. I have I call it a guarantee of cancellation, like guarantee of service, in place as well. And I say, at any time, if you feel that I'm not upholding exactly what we've discussed, I'm more than happy to cancel a buyer agency agreement that's in place. I do not want to work with anybody who does not want to work with me. Now, you all know this is an invisible shield in place, right? Because if a buyer calls your BIC and says, I don't want to be in this buyer agency agreement anymore, that BIC is going to let them out of that agreement. But it just makes them feel very comfortable that you really believe in what you're saying and you're standing behind it, and that they're willing to proceed, right? So, but I need you all to ask for them to sign it before you move forward. You have June, July, and half of August before we have to do this for real, right? These are the times that I need you all to practice this. It is amazing. If you ask the question, how many buyers will say yes? If you ask the question, how many buyers will say yes? If there are any outstanding questions, then I want you all to go back and answer them. But this is why we have that strat plan in place so they can follow through. Sometimes I send it in advance so they can look at it so we have questions beforehand. But there should be no question in their mind that you are the absolute best person to work with them before you stop, right? Any questions up to this point? How many people are very comfortable and confident asking for that buyer agency to be signed before they show that first property? Yeah, Shelly, I'm not. Oh, look at you all. Boom, boom, boom. Not at all surprised. Shelly was the first to raise her hand. Shelly, do you mind sharing with us your top strategy to get buyers to sign?
Well, I've only ever done it that way. And so that's how I started my business in '05. And I just am very clear. And I'm like you, I knew the contract inside out. And because that's the value I could bring. But I just told people that I was meeting with, and I still do it today, that, hey, before we go out and look at houses, we're going to meet in my office for about an hour. It's going to go as quickly as you want, but we're going to be looking at the disclosures that I want you to know before we're going out and looking at properties. And disclosures is a lot of things, but then they're interested. Well, my other agents didn't do that. And I'm like, yeah, probably didn't. But we have some things I want you to be aware of as you're looking at properties. And if I can go over that with a few other housekeeping things, I find that we have a much better experience and that you're going to be more of an informed buyer. And I don't get any pushback. They're like, yes, we'll meet you.
That's it.
That's the appointment. We're going to look at houses.
That's right.
Starting after 12, we're going to meet in my office at 10. We're going to go over. I'm like the Fuller brush salesman, though. For those of you that are old, you young people are like, what? But look, there used to be this guy that would come to your house. He was called the Fuller brush salesman, and he had a suitcase and he had brushes in it, and he would bring them to your house and he would open them up and he could sell you brushes because he had stuff. I like stuff. So I create my buyer broker, but in that packet is all kinds of great information about the process and the vendors and the contractors and all the disclosures, so that when they come in, I have stuff. And then any of my home warranty people, anybody out there that has a folder or a tchotchke goes in that folder. Because when I meet with them, I like to have stuff. And now I have stuff that I could pull out and go through and talk about. And I never had anybody say, I've had in my career one person. And the funny thing is, they were talking to another agent. And when I finally got her to tell me who it was a very good friend of mine.
No kidding.
Us spoke to them at the same time. They ended up not going with either one of us because they were freaked out that we knew what they were up to. They were pulling crap behind the scenes. So other than that, I've never had anybody tell me they didn't want to sign.
I love that. And I don't know how many have actually experienced this, but if you don't have that buyer agency in place, and if you don't fully sit down and discuss with them, let's just say new construction. So how many of you have had clients who walk into new construction and, put their name down because the on-site agent told them to, right? And then all of a sudden you're cut out of the deal completely, and your buyers don't have any representation, which quite honestly is exactly what the on-site agents would prefer. Because they're not there to represent your buyers. They're there to represent the builders and the developer. And so it is so extremely important that you not only protect what you're bringing to the table, but you protect those prospective buyers as well. And so having those conversations on the front end will save you so much time, so much energy. And quite honestly, if these prospective buyers, after you've shown all the value and all the strategies and, diminishing all of their fears on the front end, if they're not willing to sign with you after that, they are not worth another 10 minutes of your time. That's it.
Next.
Go on.
We don't go look at houses.
Thank you. We're done. We're done. So I always say that right now, I would say all of you on this call are already exponentially ahead of other agents in your market. What NAR is going to do to our industry is going to take the gap from here to here and do this. The gap is going to become so much larger because number one, agents have no idea what their value is. They're not willing to figure out what their value is, and they're not willing to really strategize and figure out how to best serve their clients. And so this is a beautiful opportunity right now to create your processes to ensure you're the best buyer's agent you can be. What I want you to get really comfortable at is to really discern how much you want to be paid no matter what per transaction. Get very, very good at creating that strat plan in place. And then I want you to role play with somebody else in your team, what that looks like when you're sitting down with them in Zoom or in person, and asking them, explaining to them the value you bring to the table. If they need to make up the difference, what that is. If there's a way for, sellers to pay for it, i.e. concessions and other ways, you're going to have to put that in as how are you going to get paid? And they need to be very aware of every single one and be very comfortable with every single one, no matter what, that you bring so much value to the table that they want to pay you more than you have in your buyer agency agreement. How many of you have actually been paid an additional amount, like a bonus? I've had buyers actually cut me a check and they just send it to me in the mail. And I'm like, what is this? They're like, Chanel, right, Shelly? You did such an incredible job for us, or you did this or did this. Like, I don't know how legal that is, but I've actually received things like that before. And I've had to tell them no. But, yes, beautiful clients, gifts from clients, right? Like, it's amazing. It touches my heart. But this is when we are going to really decide who are the little kids and who are the adults in our industry. This is it. So I'm going to run through, this is my prototype 1 on my buyer guide. I actually have another one coming out that I'll share with you all next week. But let me just bring up the buyer guide that I currently have. All right. Okay, so this is what I have. I don't know how to make it bigger, but it's about 17 pages. And it really talks about, this is my buyer presentation, for lack of a better word. This is when I sit down with my buyers. This is what I share with them. And it's their guide, right? And I clearly share with them. I'm a strategist, I'm an ambassador, I'm a negotiator, and I'm a communicator for them. And then we go through, the steps of helping them purchase a home, because this is so important. And this is going to differentiate, right, based on your state. But it's extremely important that they fully understand. And I talk about the difference between working with a sole proprietor and working with a team. So I work with the team. A part of my team is a buyer's agent, my marketing director, my transaction coordinator, my VA. So if you have one agent who's utilizing all hats, there's zero chance that they can actually service you in the same way that somebody who has a full team can. And so I need them to fully understand the difference between those two and who my team is and what we bring to the table. We really walk through the financial preparation. I will tell you, this is probably the one step that most buyer's agents don't walk through and don't really dig into deep enough. Most buyer's agents will say, are you pre-approved? Okay, great. Can you go ahead and send that letter to me? That's not enough, guys. I really need you to start auditing their finances, ensuring that they have the right lender in place. And I have, you all probably know Colton Whitney. Colton tells a story about he had a client who was using a lender friend, and this lender friend was giving them a great deal and was able to close on this property for them. At the closing table, they found out that this lender friend was charging them $40,000 in order to get the deal that they were doing, to where Colton's lender would have done the exact same thing for no cost at all. So you cannot skip this step with your buyers. This is probably outside of, being able to strategize and get that offer accepted and off-market deals. This is one of the top 3 things that you bring to the table, is to ensure that they are utilizing the best lender to get that offer accepted. Nate, did you have a question or something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I did. I was wondering, how do you get to this point right here? Right. Like, walk me through, is this a document that you're handing at the table? Say you're meeting with someone on, I don't know if it's in person and Zoom. Do you send it ahead of time? Like, walk me through that.
Absolutely. So the first thing I do when I have that first phone call is I set up the appointment, and I ask if they would prefer to have the appointment in person or if they would prefer to have it by Zoom. So I will always push for in person, because I'm a people person, and I think in person always works better, guys. But life gets in the way of life, right? Schedules don't always work. If it comes down to, I want you to try to fit it in between those 2 to 3 days. So if that means meeting by Zoom, that's better than waiting a week and trying to meet in person and them choosing somebody else. So the first thing I do is I set up the appointment. So I always send this in. I send this by email ahead of time, always. That way, instead of trying to fully understand everything as we're sitting down, most of them have had an opportunity to look at it and they may have questions on the front end. But I send it in advance, Nate.
What have you found is best to send it ahead of time? Is it a day in advance, 2 days?
24 hours in advance. So when I text them 24 hours in advance and say, really looking forward to our appointment tomorrow at 3:30 p.m., please check your email. I went ahead and shared with you what we're going to be discussing.
Really good.
And so going through that financial preparation is extremely important. It also allows you to understand where they are, where the partners are with each other as far as price points. Like, you get a lot out of people when you bring up finances. And that's something that has to be a direct conversation. Talking about viewing homes, I always like to share with my buyers, please, you're not hurting my feelings if you can't stand this property. How many of you have had the buyers who are like, well, it's really not my taste? I'm like, it's not my house. Like, the more I know from you, the more direct you are with me, the more honest you are with me about this property, the better it is for everybody. Like, if you can't stand this house, you tell me right out of the gate. I don't care what it is. I need you to be honest. I always ask them too, how honest do you want me to be with you? And sometimes they look at me funny and I said, oh, I can be real honest. It's just, how honest do you want me to be? Do you want me to be professionally honest? Do you want me to tell you want me to stick with the numbers? Do you want me to tell you resale problems or benefits in the future? How honest do you want me to be with you? And, honestly, some people say, well, I really just need you to tell me, how it is, based on other properties in the market. Others are like, I need you to tell me every single thing you're saying, thinking, feeling, doing. And I'm like, all right, but I need to ask permission for that because not everybody is the same, right? So you need to I always ask permission. How honest do you wish for me to be? Because I need them to tell me that. Number 4, I really like to go through strategically what differentiates me and my team from everybody else in the market, right? So escalation clauses, very strong relationships with a majority of other agents in the area. So I just had an offer accepted a couple weeks ago, and the sole reason, our offers were apples to apples, was because the agent knew I was very easy to work with and it would be a seamless transaction. And she said, I know with Chanel's buyers, they're pre-approved, they're no nonsense. She set them straight. We're not going to get a lot of hoopla, during the inspection period. It's going to be smooth sailing. She wasn't speaking poorly of the other agent, but there was no question in her mind, if she worked with me, what the outcome was going to be. So that speaks volumes. So I always say, guys, in this, it's not just the buyers that you're working with, it's the other agents too. You all have got to continue to work on those relationships because those make all the difference in the world. We have due diligence period of time. That takes up a lot of our time in our market discussing with buyers. What do you mean I pay an amount of money during due diligence period that we never get back? Like, all of those we have to have on the front end. Any of you who have that and are having that conversation as you're submitting the offer, I'm disappointed because this is such a huge part of the contract that they need to fully understand what they're risking before they actually put that offer in. Settlement is different in every single state. So, I found that, those who are coming from New York and used to working with title agencies, they come here and they're working with settlement attorneys. So I like to fully explain that to them. The title is done by the settlement attorney, but it's another company. Like, they just need to fully understand that process. I do have that questionnaire though, because it's important for us to fully understand. I had one buyer, because I dropped the ball on the front end and didn't share and didn't ask them questions. They had a child who had severe allergies to things that were found in carpet. So, those are things I need to know, right? But you don't know if you don't ask. We talk about the buyer consultation session in and of itself. I really go into detail, how I'm a strategist, an ambassador, a negotiator, a communicator. I like to go into detail about that. I really like to talk about everything that I do. This is a little bit of my resume for what Nina was talking about, right? So, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm bringing to the table. And as such, as I'm committing to you, I'm asking for you to commit to me. You've got to put it out there and you have to directly ask them that. Financial preparation, I feel like we've discussed this a lot, but not only that, I know that you all still have buyers who decide that they need to go and buy a car, 2 days before closing. Or, right. And they're like, what do you mean? I thought I was already approved. What do you mean that this completely blew up everything? Because nobody told them. You cannot depend on the lender or other people to tell them what they need to know. What does it look like to view homes? So for me, I ensure that I have all comparables available and I share with them before we even walk in the door. So I always say, okay, before we walk in the door of 123 Main Street, I just want to let you know that based on current market value, this property is overpriced by about $20,000. That being said, and I just like to give the entire pitch before I even walk in the door. I never want you to be caught off guard where you're walking in the door and they're like, okay, Chanel, well, how does this weigh based on other properties in the area? Oh, I don't know. I'm going to have to run comps, when I get home later on tonight. That's a no. That's a no, guys. Absolutely not. You need to know that before you even walk in the door. I always like to tell them, if you're looking at, look right here, we have our resources, and then there are other resources as well. So I just like to tell them, if you find a property that you did not find a resource of mine, just share it with me. We talk about strategically how we're going to present this offer. Do you want to take A, B, or C? What are you most comfortable with? You have some, just like with stocks, you have some people who will be very conservative and others who will be very liberal. My buyers, it's a lot of pressure, guys, but the buyers are like, you know what, Chanel, whatever you think, what would you do? What offer would you present? What terms would you present? How many times do you all get this, right? Like all the time. It's a lot of pressure. So, you need to fully understand your buyers before you start throwing just numbers out. Due diligence, again, I spend a lot of time talking about this because it's a huge part of our contract. So I want you to think about what part of your contract is very different and holds a lot of weight. And I want you to go into a lot of explanation about that. Nina does a great job. She makes videos and sends them out to her buyers ahead of time. Talk about settlement again, and then that's the end. So this is a single property buyer broker agreement. So in our firm, we have a one-page agreement in place right now. I'm sure a majority do already. That essentially allows us to show run property and gets this signed, confirms what your compensation is. Prior to showing that property, I want you all to start getting very familiar with this and being able to present that to your buyers in a very fluid manner. All right, friends, 8 minutes left. Any questions? Oh, I know you all have some questions. Thoughts, concerns? What are you concerned about? What are you most concerned about as you're going into August, if any?
I have a question for you, Chanel. One of the things that I've kind of had some trouble with, especially with first-time buyers, is kind of finding out the order of operations, like between that phone call, getting them connected with my lender, because I like to do that financial audit, too. But I don't love the idea, and maybe I just need to get over it and accept that it's part of the job of having an hour-long consultation with somebody who's like, not anywhere near, they're 2-3 years down the road.
I gotcha.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
So you know what, Tucker, it doesn't always have to be an hour. Sometimes my consult is 5 or 10 minutes, right? So, you really have to discern where they are in the process of purchasing and seeing, if they're 2 to 3 years out, but you feel like you can go ahead and bring a lot of value to the table and continue to do so, I would just go ahead and have that conversation with them, right? So just have that, even if it's a Zoom, right? So don't take the 20 to 30 minutes to meet with them for coffee, but at least set up that Zoom and start showing your value on the front end. So you've essentially put your stake in the ground and you've set the bar. So whomever they speak to outside of that, it's going to be extremely difficult for that other buyer's agent to reach that and certainly to surpass it. So I'm not telling you to give an hour of your time. Maybe it's 5 or 10 minutes, but it's probably a lot more time than any other agent is giving them.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Maria.
Yeah, I just want to kind of piggyback on what Tucker just said is, the financial audit and it's a partnership when I'm working with a real estate agent as a mortgage lender. And sometimes people are not as comfortable to share with the agent what they share with the lender, because maybe it's the relationship they have with the agent. Maybe it's their neighbor. Maybe it's their aunt. And finances seem to be, and rightfully so, a protected, confidential kind of thing that they would rather tell a stranger about. So
Sure.
I find a lot of success in when I get a deal up front from a realtor and I can kind of go through all those motions and then with proper confidence give the agent some sort of sense of accomplishment so that they knew that I'm the expert related to the financial world and how I can get them pre-approved. And sometimes it's not always right away, but and it might not be the rate that they want to get. It might be because their credit just was low and it might take time to build it up. So if that helps, the realtors up front, and Chanel, I don't know if you agree with that, in the process of how you set up a first time appointment, because you can go out and show a lot of homes, but are they really qualified? So I guess there's a fine line in how much time you want to spend with them to do that.
Maria, I love that. Where do you currently hold your license?
Indiana and Michigan.
Do you mind sharing your information in the chat for those who practice real estate? I sure wish that you I wish you had your license here in North Carolina. It sounds like you're a phenomenal communicator.
Thank you. And maybe I'll do that.
I love it. Gabby.
Let me unmute myself. What is the best and most professional way to communicate with our clients and or potential clients? The buyer broker agreement, when it comes in regards to them working with other possible agents, let me give you a quick scenario. I have a friend who said, I'm in Salem, Oregon. I'm with Mike and Jordan's Hilltop Property Group. So I get trained by the best, some of the best. And they've really helped me navigate this situation. But I have a friend who is looking at a home, and another realtor got in contact with her and said, oh, this, because I told her you need to be pre-approved. I need to look at the finances first, all of the things that you're talking about. And I said, and I would need a buyer broker's agreement signed before I start working for you. And, in true friend fashion, sometimes our friends would like us to work for free. And she said, well, there's this other realtor who said, I don't have to be pre-approved, nor do I need to sign anything. And so I clearly communicated to her, I tried my best, and just to be professional, how do we address, what would be the wording that we could, to use when it comes to talking about other agents? Because I know we have to be careful. I know remaining professional, but what would be the best way to communicate that this is going to be a law, and everyone needs to do this, when other agents are telling our clients and potential clients that they do not have to do that? And so kind of getting into sticky waters there. So.
Oh, Gabby, bless is the first thing I have to say to that. And secondly, Nina, I'm going to call on you because you and I just had this conversation. Nina, how would you respond to that client?
Yeah, happens a lot, right? And so one of the things that I often am saying to them is, you're going to get what you pay for. You don't even know this person. You don't know if they have your best interest. And let's also be clear that that person is going to make you sign an agreement starting July 1st anyway. They're just trying to get around it. That is definitely one thing I would be saying right now, especially leading up to all of this, making sure that they understand none of us can show you a house anymore unless we have this in place. But I make sure that they also understand, like, as they're going through that, if you don't know how much you can afford for a home, you're going to potentially end up disappointed, because even if that house is $500,000 and you're getting approved for it, what that person is not educating you on is what the payment amount is going to be. And that's what working with a local lender who we're all partnered with will help you understand, because you may not like the payment amount at $500,000 and you may need to be at a different amount. So there's just I just go right in and continue building that relationship with them and having them understand, like, there is so much more than just signing a buyer agency agreement. There is so much more about getting approved that if you are not fully educated, you're going to end up very disappointed in the end.
And end up, quite honestly, Gabby, spending more money on the table possibly than they ever thought, right? And so
Yep.
I always say, if you're willing to leave what may be the greatest asset you ever purchased to somebody who's not fully educated, that takes a lot of trust on your part, buyer. And, I really wish you the best with that. I just happened to receive my information from the National Association of Realtors and my state real estate commission and association. So I really trust what they're telling me.
Okay, great answers. That just reiterates what I've already communicated to her, and Jordan helped walk me through that. And so I will continue on that route. So thank you guys.
Time always flies with you all. It has already passed by a minute. I appreciate you. For those of you who don't have my email address, I'm sure Nate Ammon can get it out to you. I'm happy to have any discussions with you personally. And if you are finding a block along the way as you're meeting with these prospective buyers, please reach out to me. I'm here to help you, to coach you, to get you across it. I believe in each of you, and know that, these next 2.5 quarters that we have, you're going to knock it out of the park. Prepare, believe in yourself, and go get them done.